It is crazy to think about. Almost 20 years ago, I was at the airport of Mexico City getting ready to study abroad in a small town in Missouri called Warrensburg. 8 years ago, almost 8 years ago, I was ready to move to the New England area from the Midwest to work as a professor of economics in a private college. 8 years ago, too, I was ready to be a mother to a little girl called Valentina. A year ago, unfortunately, I had to say goodbye to my mother for the rest of my life. And now I'm thinking, here I am, talking to you about genderless society. I want to start this topic to telling you how did I become aware of gender, because gender, after all, is a category. Gender is an instrument utilized in research to organize information that became very important after World War II. So when I was a little girl, I remember my father telling me, Carol, do you help me to change the oil? Carol, do you want to go with me to work? Maybe we can have lunch. Carol, do you want to go and attend conferences with me? Carol, let me record your first public speaking. And it was my dad who was telling me, don't move like this, talk like that. You know, my dad sort of gave me a lot of confidence, to be honest. But my dad was also, a Mexican man. And of course, when I was an adolescent, our relationship changed. My mother, on the other hand, it was a Mexican mother. I recall my mom, and now that I think about it, she had a dinner, different lunch prepared. We have fresh breakfast in the morning. And Christmas and so-called Thanksgiving in Mexico were fun, and we had awesome food, and we have decorations all over the house. But my mom was also what we will conceive today a small business owner. She was an accountant. She was so busy when businesses have to file their taxes. And I remember my mom, not sleeping just to accomplish all her goals in terms of submitting taxes. And also I recall woman in my house helping my mother to get things done. So somebody will cook, some of us will take care of us, and others will help her with her business. So I see that my mom, despite of being a full-time worker, she was always around us, and her presence will remain in my heart forever. So where did I become gendered individual, a gendered person? That was when I started working. I remember, as a professor of economics, wait a minute, you're the professor or you're the GTA? I am the professor. All right, students will ask. Then going into conferences is not only the environment, because, you can get through uneasiness, or at least I can go through it, no problem. But it was more about the topics of my research. Carol, economists don't talk about that. Economists talk about inflation rates, interest rate, financial markets, macroeconomic policy, economic growth, supply and demand. Who cares about immigrant women laboring as childcare providers in the United States? It's an econ topic, but it's leaning more to sociology, it's leaning more to anthropology. In fact, my first publication was in a journal that is called American Journal of Sociology and Economics, right? So, Carol, you're halfway, economics and sociology. So I did not like that. I was like, no, I'm an economist, and here I am teaching economics in an institution where I work. So gender is a category. Where this category became important? That was after World War II. Of course, it comes from a long time ago, but after World War II, there was a need to organize information in terms of population growth. So specifically in Europe and also in the United States, gender became the category. When you go and fill out the form, okay, there is a female and there is a male. And we need to make sure that society is going to procreate. So we need to make sure that woman somehow is going to fill that role. And ever since, right, woman has been perceived as the person who is in charge of the house, so charge of the household, right? It's funny because when you ask somebody, or when you ask a woman who doesn't work, she will say, I don't work. Oh, wait a minute, you have 3 children. Oh, yeah, I'm a housewife, right? So from that part, gender becomes an instrument of to organize information, but gender also sets expectations, right? And I don't want to talk a lot about expectations because I think, as feminist economists have said, we have achieved milestones in terms of acknowledging gender inequality for certain populations, especially for highly educated people. So the milestones, right? Shrinking or bridging the wage gap. The fact that I'm here talking about these issues is already a milestone, right? Gender has become a topic of debate, right? So the problem with gender is what problem does it cause or what it provokes on people? Well, it not only determines the expectations, but sometimes the destiny of individuals, right? So for women, there is the expectations to be feminine still, and for men also there is the expectations to be male. And we know what more or less that means, right? For women, it's being delicate, being submissive, being in a way cordial, friendly, smiley, talkative, grooming. For men, almost the opposite. Isn't that funny? Like it's aggressive, competitive, doesn't talk much. Very straight to the point, objective, right? Not subjective. So nothing is wrong with that if, our institutions will not embrace one category over the other, right? So if gender is a category, why not to just get rid of the category and the expectations or the definitions that are attached to the category just dissipate in a spectrum, right? So being a female loses meaning because a man or a man can be a female man and a woman can be a male woman, right? And I think that's where we're working on. We're working on that spectrum to kind of dissipate the expectations and have no problems with having sexual orientation. And I think in that sense, the sexual orientation battle is gaining a lot of strength, right? And the transgender movement is precisely this fighting the spectrum between female and male in terms of sexual orientation. And of course, companies are also, in particular in the United States, are also working in that sense, right? But gender inequality exists. And after COVID-19, gender inequality has exacerbated, right? In terms of the wage gap in the United States increased tremendously. So it was 82 cents for a dollar earned by a white man, and a white woman will earn 83 cents, right? And now it has decreased below 70 cents. And when it comes down to, in terms of ethnicity, that share actually decreases tremendously. When it comes down to a woman who is a mother, the actual wage gap is huge. It goes all the way down to 50 cents when it comes down to Hispanic women compared to the earnings of white men. So how can we dissipate the gender categories that we have embraced? I will tell you about a little more about my story as a professor. Right? And as a feminist, I will categorize myself. So when I became a woman, I started working at the same time. I actually defended my dissertation when Valentina was a few months, and I attended the conferences, and I was still breastfeeding, so it was a little messy, but I did it. And it was a struggle, right? What am I supposed to do? Like, I really want to advance in my career. I want to become a professor. I want to become a researcher more than a professor. Well, I have to go to conferences. I have to do this. I have to do that. I have to continue working. Actually, took like 2 months off work. And when I came back, they were like, Karol, are you sure you want to come back? I'm like, yeah, no problem. But that no problem was actually not very authentic from my side. I did have a problem. I felt guilty all the time. And of course, the guilt came from me. And a lot of people will say, well, Karol, it's natural that you feel guilty. The nature tells us that we have to be by our children. You have to breastfeed. There is nature. Nature is talking. And I would say, yes, but, you took maternity leave, right? So when I was ready, maternity leave for the United States means, less than 3 months or 3 months. In other countries, like in Sweden, there is a law that actually gives parents a year, right? So when I was preparing for this talk and trying to get very succinct, and to the point. I read an article as an economist and as an academic, as an anthropologist, that spoke about paternity leave. I never thought about paternity leave. I couldn't believe it. Here I am, read, speak 3 languages, travel the world, I have so many different papers written, and it never occurred to me that there was paternity leave. Of course, I'm an immigrant. I come from a country that, it's very driven by the notion of motherhood. Of course, the United States too, but in a different sense. And I couldn't believe that I've learned a couple of days ago that I never thought about paternity leave. So I realized that I have embraced, despite the fact that during my childhood, I was not aware of it, that I have embraced gender through motherhood. Why? Because I could not even think about the fact that my husband could take paternity leave. Right? So how can we dissipate these gender categories that we have built throughout the years? Right? I think by acknowledging our unconscious biasness, by admitting that we have been raised in a society that has set certain expectations despite the levels of education, despite the levels of exposure now to what we consider the battle of gender inequality. How can we go from here? How can we actually start to dissipate or to sort of destroy those expectations that we have in our unconscious, at the unconscious level? Well, one of them is reading. I did that, right? But the other one is to pretty much set your spirit free. Gender sometimes plays a role, and as Foucault will say, will play the role of surveillance, monitoring your behavior as a man, as a woman, because this is not just about women, it's also about men. Men have set their own expectations as well, right? In the sense of paternity leave, it will probably be, well, I can take paternity leave. Oh, never thought about it. Maybe there is a first man that actually took the paternity leave and says to his friend, hey, why don't you take paternity leave? It's okay. And he says it in a public forum and everybody else hears. And it's already out there. Food for thought. So from now on, I will invite you to think about where is your unconscious biasness and how can you get rid of them?